Hello, my APUS history friends. I hope everybody is doing well. If you happen to miss class or need a recap from Tuesday, March 28th, this is the video for you. We are still on the Truman post-World War II America slides. We're going to finish those up in this video. And then afterwards, I'll post another video for kids that missed on Thursday. And then I think we should all be done with SATs and play stuff. So everybody should normally be back to schedule then. Anyways, picking up with the Truman slides, I'm on slide 23, the problem with Germany. So, obviously, after the Nazi Empire collapses, there becomes a question. What happens with Germany? Not sure if we're aware of this or not, but Germany is an economic powerhouse for not only Europe, but for the entire world. They're successful in engineering, which is a really big part of, the German economy. So Germany is a critical country for the world economy. So we need to figure out what we're doing with it post-World War II. Anyways, the agreement comes to be that the United States, the Soviet Union, are going to split Germany and their capital city of Berlin in half. We do this after having the Nuremberg trials, sentencing Nazi officials and leaders to prison or to death for their crimes in World War II. So the German leadership is pretty much wiped out as well. And after we split into two different zones, the United States, again, is going to gain control of the western side of Germany and the western side of Berlin, with the Soviet Union gaining control of the eastern side of Germany and the eastern side of Berlin. This is actually pretty interesting because it's one of the two instances we're really going to see where you can compare capitalism and communism pretty evenly. West Germany ends up being much more successful economically, has a much higher standard of living, and many, many people flee East Germany and East Berlin into West Berlin and West Germany, which is why they need to put up a wall. So West Germany and East Germany are a really good example of the war between capitalism and communism and why capitalism is more successful. Why would you have so many people leaving to the point where you need to put up the Berlin Wall if, communist life was so great? So anyways, you can see on the map there how the split actually works with the zoom in focus on Berlin being split. Berlin is completely surrounded by Soviet territory, and the Soviets are aware of this, as you can see in the bear political cartoon with its paws about to close around Berlin. Essentially, the Russians, in one of the first major instances of the Cold War, are going to try to cut off the U.S., the U.K., and France from supplying West Berlin with supplies, essentially trying to choke off West Berlin, force their people into some sort of suffering until the United States will relent and give control of all of Berlin to the Soviet Union. The U.S. refuses to do so. This is, again, one of the first instances of containment, of trying to stop the spread of communism under the Truman Doctrine. So we really can't let this go. So what the U.S., the U.K., and France does is completes the Berlin airlift, which for over a year, we are going to continuously fly planes into Berlin to supply the Berliners with what they need to get through harsh winters, food, oil, stuff like that. And eventually the Russians give up and allow us to hold on to West Berlin, because they knew we'd keep supplying it sort of in perpetuity. So victory to the United States in the first one here. But anyways, really good example of communism versus capitalism. Due to this incident and, a whole bevy of other instances, we find it necessary to, make teams for this. The United States is going to form NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Their main goal is to contain and stop the spread of communism at all costs, just like the Truman Doctrine. The NATO countries are made up of pretty much the U.S. and its friends, the capitalist crew, if you will. So it's like the U.S., the U.K., France, most of Western Europe, Canada, are all going to join, the original NATO. And again, they work to defend capitalism and stop the spread of communism. NATO is also the reason why Russia's fighting a war in Ukraine. I don't have time to get all there, but look it up. It still has ramifications today. Anyways, in response, the Russians formed something called the Warsaw Pact, or the Communist Crew, the Red Team, as they're going to be known as. But anyways, the Warsaw Pact is the collection of communist countries in the world led by Russia and the Soviet Union, which includes pretty much Eastern Europe. It doesn't necessarily include China, even though China is a communist country at this point. They would probably work together if there was an issue, but not officially. But the main idea, the *** exclamation point here, is collective security. The idea that an attack on one is an attack on all. So someone messes with your friend group, someone messes with one of your really good friends, of course you're going to step up to defend them, right? This really does end up preventing wars as well, because the Russians know and the United States know that if they spread their influence into communist or capitalist countries or vice versa, that the other country's big military is coming for them, essentially starting a global war. So whatever country wants to start the global war, invade one of the other NATO or Warsaw Pact countries, and every other country has to attack because of collective security. An attack on one is an attack on all. We can see a map of the NATO and the Warsaw Pact countries on the next slide, slide 29, right, which is really going to set the world up for the future here of communist and capitalist worlds being divided. Looking back at home here, in the first period you covered this already, but second period did not. But the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, also known as the GI Bill, soldiers are coming home from World War II, and they need some help with what their new jobs are going to be, and help with mortgages and medical care, and start small businesses and stuff like that. So the U.S. government spends a whole bunch of money to help out the veterans coming home from World War II. The only bad part about this, it does generate the economy, helps create a middle class, makes a better educated public, all that stuff. Black Americans are not eligible for the GI Bill. Once again, we'd already established this fact that basically black servicemen are going to come back from World War II and say, hey, we just fought a war for you. I just got hurt for you. My friend just died for you. For a country that clearly doesn't want us because they don't treat us equally. Same thing as another slap in the face with the GI Bill. You're giving all these benefits to veterans that help fight and defend freedom in the world, but not the black veterans. So again, leads to this idea that something needs to change. It helps spark the civil rights movement. And then there's a whole bunch of political cartoons and advertisements that go along with the GI Bill, right? We can see that the U.S. is going to compete with Russia, not only for territory and not only for economics, but also in technology as well. And we have the space race. Basically, the U.S. and Soviet Union are going to compete to see who can establish dominance in space first. The Russians kick our butt at the beginning of this. I'm not going to lie. They put the first satellite in space. It's called Sputnik. They put the first living creature in space. It's a dog named Laika. Sad story that goes with that. And they put the first human being in space, Yuri Gagarin. He's the first human being to enter space. He's a Russian cosmonaut. Anyways, since the Soviet Union takes such a big lead in the space race, the U.S. decides to step up, sends our first satellite into space, Explorer 1, a couple years after Sputnik, and really starts to fund space exploration and science, math, technology, and engineering, also known as STEM programs in public schools. But again, when we formed NASA, we were trying to organize to keep up with the Russians in terms of the space race. Basically, the feeling across America is, how could this country that we've been told is backwards and struggles because of communism, how are they beating us to space? So we try to fund money into this to obviously catch up in the space race. We end up, by the way, winning the space race by putting Neil Armstrong on the moon in 1969. That's about 15 years after this. But we do beat the Russians to the moon, which was really the big goal and the big prize. A lot of celebration and stuff. We'll watch the video in class at some point. Anyways, the last couple things that I want to talk about here, we do have a quick little interesting incident between Richard Nixon and the premier of the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev. Richard Nixon is vice president at this time under Dwight Eisenhower, and he gets into this argument with Khrushchev about, it's called the kitchen debate, because basically they're at the World's Fair, and the U.S. is showing what a modern apartment looks like in the 1950s with a washing machine and the first dishwasher and a television and a radio. And Khrushchev thinks we're lying, thinking that this is how an average American lives. But basically it shows us that a war of words is better than a war of weapons for sure. So the kitchen debate, there's an interesting picture there of Nixon putting his finger in Khrushchev's chest. It's a pretty famous image, but also shows that we can talk this out a little bit. There's a reason why the war doesn't go nuclear. The last thing we're going to talk about is the U-2 incident. Essentially, we captured the Rosenbergs in the U.S. We knew that they were spying on us. That's how the Soviets get the atomic bomb. But the Russians also know we are spying on them. All of our cards are on the table. They know this because we were flying a U-2 spy plane over Russia with a pilot by the name of Gary Powers. That U-2 spy plane is shot down. When it's shot down, Gary Powers is captured. He was supposed to commit suicide like CIA agents are supposed to when they get captured. He's eventually tortured. We're not 100% sure what information he gave to the Russians, but essentially the Russians captured this guy, and they're now well aware that the U.S. is also spying on them, leading to higher tensions in the Cold War in general. Anyways, we did that, and then we did a DBQ outline, so I will stop there and move on to our next class. Hope you have a good day. Hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions.